The relationship between the US and Venezuela, well, it's pretty much at a breaking point. We're seeing military forces on high alert, so in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of this whole conflict. We'll go way beyond the headlines to figure out what's really at stake here. Okay, to really get a sense of how serious this is, just consider this for a moment. The U.S. has sent the largest naval force to the Caribbean since the Cuban Missile Crisis back in 1962. I mean, that's a huge deal. We're talking warships, bombers, troops, all parked right off Venezuela's coast. The stakes? Yeah, they could not be higher.
So what's the official reason for this massive military buildup? Well, the U.S. is calling it a new front in the war on drugs. But is that the whole story? As you're about to see, when you start looking closer, that official story, it starts to fall apart, and a much more complicated picture comes into view. All right, so let's start with that official story. The U.S. says this whole military operation is a targeted campaign against drug trafficking. Let's take a look at how that campaign has actually played out.
So it all kicked off with military strikes on these small speedboats. The administration claimed they were full of drugs, but, they never really offered any evidence. We've seen 26 of those strikes so far. And from there, things escalated fast. It went from that to covert CIA action, and now we have the full-scale naval deployment we're seeing today. And this is where the official story starts to hit some serious snags. See, the U.S. calls Venezuela a narcostate and President Maduro a cartel leader. But the source material reports tell us something different. For one, Venezuela isn't even a major drug producer. And get this, the whole point is supposed to be stopping drugs from getting to America, right? Well, it turns out most of the drugs that do pass through Venezuela are actually headed for Europe. That's a pretty big disconnect.
So that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? If the main target isn't really drugs, then what is it? What's the real reason for all of this?
And that's where we start to peel back the first layer. Beneath the official story, we find a different objective: regime change. Specifically, the long-standing U.S. goal of getting Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, out of power.
And you don't have to dig deep for evidence on this one. I mean, it doesn't get much more direct than this quote from Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles. She reportedly said the plan is to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. So yeah, forget the war on drugs. This sounds a lot more like raw political pressure.
But wait a minute, are we really saying the biggest military deployment in the Caribbean in 60 years is just about removing one guy? It feels like there has to be more to it, right? Is there a bigger prize?
And this is where we get to the absolute heart of the matter. The real core motive, according to our source material, is all about liquid gold, a resource that has pretty much defined global politics for more than a century: oil.
Just look at this number, 17%. That's Venezuela's share of the world's entire known oil reserves. Let that sink in. This isn't just some national resource. It's a piece of the global energy pie that is absolutely massive and strategically crucial.
And to put that into perspective for you, Venezuela has over 300 billion barrels. The United States, around 80 billion. So Venezuela's reserves are almost 4 times bigger. We're talking about the single largest prize in the entire global energy game. It's that simple.
So this is absolutely crucial to understand. This isn't just about oil to fuel cars and planes. For the U.S., it's about much bigger strategic interests. First, achieving dominance over global energy resources. Second, curbing China's growing influence. They've invested a ton in Venezuela's oil. And third, it's about controlling key resources right here in the Western Hemisphere.
And if you had any doubt left at all, listen to this quote from a 2023 speech by Donald Trump. He said, and I'm quoting directly, "When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil." I mean, it's all right there. The connection between military pressure and the desire to get that oil couldn't be more explicit.
Now, this desire for control, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. To really truly understand what's going on today, we've got to rewind a bit and look at the long and pretty complicated history between the U.S. and Venezuela's oil. So back in the early 60s, American companies like Exxon and Mobil basically ran the show. In fact, Venezuela had the world's largest community of American expats. But then came 1976, a huge turning point. Venezuela nationalized its oil industry, meaning it took control away from all those foreign companies. Fast forward to today, and only one American energy company, Chevron, is still operating there.
And this next quote from White House advisor Stephen Miller really gives you a window into the current administration's mindset. He said, American sweat, ingenuity, and toil created the oil industry in Venezuela. Its tyrannical expropriation was the largest recorded theft of American wealth and property. So they don't see that 1976 nationalization as a country taking control of its own resources. They see it as a theft. And that sense of historical grievance, it's a really powerful driver of the policy we're seeing today.
Okay, so let's pull all these different threads together to see the big picture. We started this whole thing with an official war on drugs, right? But what we've actually uncovered is a conflict with so many layers, driven by politics, economics, and a whole lot of history.
So think of it like an onion. On the surface, the outer layer, you've got the official war on drugs campaign. But you peel that back and you get to the next layer, the political goal of ousting President Maduro. Peel that back even further and you hit the economic core, this deep desire to control the world's largest oil reserves. And right at the very center of it all, you find that historical grievance, that feeling of being robbed back in 1976.
And all of this really leaves us with one final big question. When you look at everything, the massive military deployment, the intense political pressure, the deep historical roots of this conflict, you really have to ask, in a world that is so hungry for energy, what is the true price of liquid gold?